Hey guys, Captain Mike, welcome to Whiskey and Literature. Tonight we're talking about bourbon. We're talking about bottom shelf bottles, basic bourbons, boomer bottles, the bottles that your grandfather or your favorite uncle, he drinks. You could also say that these are beginner bottles, and that I think dollars to donuts, someone who's going and buying the first bottle of whiskey probably bought one of these bottles. That's just anecdotal. I don't have anything to back up what my supposition is, but I think these would be very clearly people's first choices for bottles of whiskey. I mean, imagine if you're 21 years old and you're going to go buy your first bottle of whiskey. What are you going to buy? You're going to buy something that's familiar to you. Perhaps, again, your grandfather's, your dad's, your favorite uncle's, he drinks Jack Daniels, so you go and you buy a Jack Daniels. Or you're 21 and you're on your first or second job, you're not making a lot of money. All you want to do is buy some alcohol for as cheap as possible so the alcohol can do what alcohol does. So yeah, you go buy a Jim Beam bourbon because it's so cheap. Why not? I mean, reminisce with me for a minute. I mean, go and think about the first bottle of whiskey that you bought. What was it? Was it one of these bottles? Go and let us know. I would be interested. I'm in a hotel, and I've been in this hotel for 1 month, and I'm going to be in this hotel all the way through July. So thanks for sticking with me. And when August hits, and it'll be back normal in my own home, instead of here I am at work spending 2 months in this hotel doing some training and doing what you got to do with your family. So if you're like, your quality and everything, I know. It'll get better. Thanks for sticking with me. Okay, let's get to why did I buy these bottles? So I came to this hotel and I didn't bring any whiskey with me. I went to the store. The first thing I did is I checked in, brought my bags in, went right to ABC, and I bought 8 bottles that you see here in front of you. Now I know you can see back here, there's a couple Blood Oath. Mrs. Captain has come out and brought bottles for me a couple times, some of the nicer stuff, and I, maybe had a pour or two of that. Did a video of the little book, chapter 8, Path Not Taken. And let's see that video, I'll link below. Also in the hotel, I did one of kind of my bourbon trail tips and tricks. Also in the hotel, Mrs. Captain and I filmed a video of whiskey. And I didn't really like that video, so it's on the proverbial cutting room floor. And just not gonna release that video. But I went ahead and bought these whiskeys because I wanted to return to the basic bourbons and go back to the beginning and see what these brands are about. So these are all brands that I like. Like, I've been to all of these distilleries except for Wild Turkey. I've been to their store, which recently opened. They opened their distillery recently. I'm going to go in September, but I have not done a distillery tour here. But I've done Heaven Hill, so it kind of covers Larceny and Evan Williams. All of these brands, I have bottles at my house of better stuff, are more expensive anyway, more allocated, higher proof. And I wanted to return to this. I mean, again, think about your first bottle. We always think about our newest bottles, like these Blood Oaths. We think of the latest and greatest bottles that we have, but do you ever think about your first bottle? Now, I remember my first bottle that I bought, and it was a Jack Daniels, not Old Number 7. It was a Sinatra Select. Not to belabor the point, and if you've seen any of my videos, I say the word Mormon on almost all of my videos. Don't mean to just keep, beating that dead horse, but I did grow up Mormon. I was Mormon for most of my adulthood and most of my life, for that matter. And when 47 years old, I decided I didn't want to be a Mormon anymore, and that I wanted to sin. And so I started drinking whiskey, and I went out and bought myself a bottle of Jack Daniels Sinatra Select. So all of these bottles I do have at my house, except 3 of them. 3 of them I didn't even own until buying them the other day. They are the Four Roses, they are Wild Turkey 81, and the Old Forester 86. And going back to Jack Daniels for a minute, so I bought that Sinatra Select. And 3 years later, in October of 2022, for my 50th birthday, Mrs. Captain and I and 2 other couples went to Nashville, did the whole honky-tonk thing, which I can really recommend. It's very safe. Thought it was a great time to go and do that stuff. But we went and we did down in Lynchburg a distillery tour at Jack Daniel's, and that was the first distillery tour that I had ever done. And after we did that, I went home and I realized I have like 7 or 8 or 9 bottles of Jack Daniel's at my house, and I've never owned a bottle of Old No. 7. So end of 2022, so less than like a year and a half ago, I bought my first bottle of Old No. 7. Because by the time I started drinking whiskey, I had already been in my career 20 plus years. I have a little bit of money, and so I didn't have to buy, Four Roses Bourbon or Jim Beam White Label. I could buy Booker's. I could buy Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select and the Sinatra Select. So when I came here to the hotel, again, I thought, try a couple here that I've never had and go back to the basics and see what these distilleries, what their money makers, what they put out. Now, I mean, if you ask yourself a question, what is the real Jack Daniel's? Is it Old No. 7, or is it the Single Barrel Select, or is it the Single Barrel Proof Select? What is the real Old No. 7? I mean, Jim Beam. I like me some Booker's. I like going to their distillery and to their store. I met Fred and Freddie No numerous times. I like Booker's and I like Lineage and I like a lot of their products. Do I really care? Or do I go to Jim Beam White Label when I want to have a pour of whiskey? Not necessarily. But Lineage does not keep the lights on for Jim Beam. Little Book doesn't even pay Freddie No's salary, I'm sure. What keeps the lights on at Jim Beam is Jim Beam White Label. Jack Daniel's, they sell some great products, but they sell the crap out of Old No. 7. And that's what, for Jack Daniel's, keeps the lights on and pays the bills. So these are the main representative. This is what people see first and foremost when they think of Jack Daniel's in the nation. So the question is, are any of these bottles in 2024 worth buying anymore? So I have, for 4 weeks, these are like 95% of the whiskey that I've been drinking. And I've been drinking it primarily neat. I mean, I've been drinking Evan Williams neat for 4 weeks. And they're all, I'm just so you can see the level, they're all pretty equivalent. I've been trying to drink them evenly. And some nights I've drank 3 or 4 bottles, and some nights I've even drank all 8 whiskeys, just very small pours. Some of you are like, this is all you drank in 4 weeks. And some of you are like,
dude, you have some problems.
But it hasn't been a problem to drink this much whiskey in 4 weeks. I could drink more, but I'm in class 4 or 5 days a week. And when I'm not in class, I'm usually studying, and I take about a day and a half a week and spend some time with Mrs. Captain. She's been coming out to the hotel instead of me going home. And so I just kind of let loose about a day and a half every week, but the rest of the week I'm doing work stuff, studying, doing some training. So it's been very interesting to drink these bottles. Okay, specs and stats. If you're kind of new, let's just go through basics, right? These are all bourbons. I know it's a Tennessee whiskey, but it meets the quality or the definition of a bourbon, so we'll just consider these all bourbons. Not only that, they're all, I would say, relatively Kentucky-style bourbons. I mean, they are all Kentucky bourbons except this one here, but they're Kentucky-style bourbons in the sense that they have a huge amount of corn for the most part, a small amount of rye or wheat, and a measure of malted barley. That would be the mash bill or the recipe for you new guys out there. So these are all, so again, bourbon, 51% corn, usually some rye, and then malted barley. We have 2 of these that are different, the Maker's Mark and the Larceny. These are wheated bourbons. If you're really cool, you call them a wheater in the sense that there's no rye in them. It's corn, wheat, and malted barley. The others are corn, rye, and malted barley. These are fairly low proof. These are the large batch. This is labeled small batch, but they're all kind of the large batch that these distilleries put out. They're all relatively close to 80 proof. I believe the Jack Daniel's, the Jim Beam, and the Four Roses, I think, are all 80 proof, Wild Turkey's 81. These 2 are 86. And then, excuse me, the 2 highest proof ones are the wheaters, and that would be the Maker's Mark and the Larceny coming in at 90 and 92. And maybe these are the highest proof ones because typically with a wheated bourbon, it's just a little softer. It doesn't have that rye spice component to it. And so it just has a higher proof to kind of punch through that softness, if you will. That's just my supposition. Price-wise, they're all very similar. I would have thought before buying these that the Evan Williams would be the cheapest. What would you have thought would be the cheapest? Any thoughts? I would have, I'm pointing to Jack Daniels. I would have thought the Evan Williams here was the cheapest. But it was actually the Jim Beam rolled in here at $13.99, Evan Williams at $14.99. Everything else was $20.99 and above, up to the Larceny, which was $25.99. So relatively cheap. In fact, for all these bottles, I paid less than I paid for one of my Blood Oath. Okay, these are all bourbons, so, and they're non-age stated for the most part. So if you're a bourbon and you don't have an age statement on the bottle, you know it's at least 4 years old. We do have 3 that have an age statement. Jim Beam says it's aged 4 years. Wild Turkey says it's aged up to 5 to 8 years. And Four Roses on their website, it does say the bottle is 5 years old. Everything else is non-age stated. So that's just roughly kind of the specs and stats. Again, they're all pretty low. The ryes are pretty low. I think the Jack Daniels is as low as 8% rye in it. The Four Roses has the most rye. Okay, that's it. So now let's just let's talk about which two are my least favorite and which were my most favorite. I did a blind a couple days ago, also did a video which is not going to see the light of day because, as you can imagine, at the end of that video, having drank 8 whiskeys, I was slurring and enjoying myself a little too much. So I have my middle 4 and then my top 2 and my least favorite 2. So let's put these here, not in any order necessarily here at the beginning. We'll talk about these. Here we go. This is kind of how it played out. So I did myself an Elite 8, if you will, style bracket. So 2, 2, 2, 2, single elimination. So in that first round, 4 bottles got cut. And then I went down to 4, again, 2, 2, 2 bottles got cut. So that left me with 2 bottles here as my most favorite, and I'll tell you later which one it was my most favorite. But very clear which were my least 2 favorite as well. However, the ones in the middle, I can't really put these in order. In fact, I think if you had me do a blind with these 8 bottles once a week for 4 weeks, I'm pretty sure that these 4 bottles would never be in any kind of order, of the same order, wouldn't repeat itself. It's just be depending on how my day went, what the weather's like, what I'd eaten the day before or the day of. Like that all influences how you like whiskeys. And I think that these 4 are just, there's just a hair's breadth between each one of these. So we'll just consider these the middle of the road 4 whiskeys. Now these 2 ended up very clearly being my least favorite. And my second to least favorite was the Four Roses. Now, Four Roses, Four Roses has 2 mash bills. So they have a high rye and a higher rye. Four Roses has 5 yeast strains. So if you have 1 mash bill with 5 yeast strains, you have 5 different whiskeys. And here you have a different mash bill with 5 yeast strains, gets 5 more whiskeys. So if you buy a Four Roses single barrel, on the back will be a code and will tell you which mash bill and which yeast strain. So technically 10 different whiskeys. So you can find in Four Roses, you can probably find a whiskey that you like that's a single barrel, and you can buy that same one over and over again. In fact, they sell them in kits, I think of 10. You could just try them all. That's pretty easy. This is a blend of all 10 of those whiskeys batched together, just the Four Roses bourbon. I find it very bland, very weak, thin, unappealing to me. Definitely, of these 8 is my second to least favorite. Surprising to me because I'm a big Wild Turkey fan. I think in 2023, my second most drank bottle that I drank the most bottles of was the Wild Turkey Rare Breed Bourbon. But the Wild Turkey 81, of this 8 bottles, was very clearly my least favorite bottle. And I even went home and I got my Wild Turkey 101 and Rare Breed, and I was like, do I really not like Wild Turkey that much? And I really thoroughly enjoyed that bottle. But Wild Turkey 81, there is just, I mean, it was very clear. When I picked this bottle up and in the blind, it was clear this sharpness and harshness on the nose. It's just there. I could just tell immediately that was an unpleasant whiskey. And I've been drinking all of these solidly, so I knew exactly which one it was. And I was just like, very clearly, it stood out from all the rest. To me, it's a very unpleasant nose. There is some of those bourbon notes in there, but it's just an overlying harshness. Cheers after that, huh? And I find that harshness carries through into the palate. I find it unpleasant. Now, the mouthfeel is pretty nice, and I think it punches above its weight at 81 proof, but it's just leaving me with a sour taste in my mouth and just not something that I want to drink on a regular basis at all. Okay, so that leaves me with my favorite two. And I kind of hemmed and hawed on these two. They are very different whiskeys on the Maker's Mark and the Jack Daniel's Old No. 7. I went back and forth, and as a guy who's a self-described rye guy, I mean, neither one of these would be any kind of a rye whiskey really, because there's no rye at all in this one. And this one only has 8% rye. But on that day that I did the blind, I did prefer the Jack Daniel's Old No. 7. The Maker's Mark, I did enjoy it. It was a nice sweetness, a nice roundness to the pour, and in this company it really stood out as kind of just a more complete pour than the other ones. But Jack Daniel's, for me, it just kind of stood out as the most bestest in this group of whiskeys. Is it an excellent pour? Is it my go-to whiskey? Certainly not. But when you're drinking these in this company, it is a standout, right? Just an immediate banana note. There's some nice sweetness. It's a fruity sweetness. There's some nice vanilla, just a hint of oak. I think it's a very pleasant note. It's an inviting note. It's not overwhelming or very complex, but it has all the right notes, and it's just a basic bourbon for a nice pour. Again, cheers. Just instant sweetness. Just in a caramel, nice vanilla, and it's just banana from the beginning to the end. Where Old No. 7 to me falls apart is in the finish. There is some bitterness there in the finish, but it's not so bad. It's not so overwhelming that it doesn't help Old No. 7, to me, elevate itself over these other pours. So it is what it is. I mean, like, what do you think? Like, if you had, like, is there one of these bottles that if you went to the store, you would pick over these, over any of the other ones? If you could only get one, which one would you pick? If you sent me to the store for a bottle of whiskey, now knowing what I would know, I would probably pick the Jack Daniel's, I think, every time. Now, having said that, are these bottles worth buying in 2024? Like I said, I have all these bottles except a couple of them at my house, and we do drink them. So when do I drink these bottles at my house? I'll drink them if I'm going to do a video and I don't want my first pour of whiskey to be whatever I'm drinking. Maybe I'll have a sip of one of these first and then go do the video. I'll have these out if Mrs. Captain or I want a pour of whiskey in a Coke. These are perfectly fine. In fact, a Jack and Coke, I mean, is there any better combination? That's pretty much all I drank when we were in Nashville. I can't even tell you how many Jacks and Coke Jack and Cokes, I drank when we were in Nashville. Just all day, every day. It was a good time. These are also good. Let's say if you're at your house and you have a couple pours of the Blood Oath, or you have a couple pours of a good whiskey, and now you're to the point you don't want to keep drinking the good whiskey. These are perfectly acceptable to finish the night out. Especially like think if you're drinking a high power cask strength barrel proof something whiskey like that, and you just want to mellow out, maybe watch a movie, and you've had a couple sips already. These are perfectly great to kind of mellow out and finish off your evening. I think these serve that purpose really, really well. So they do have a purpose to have on your cabinet besides all of those just nice, beautiful, expensive whiskeys that we all enjoy and love. That's my thoughts, guys. Bottom two, top two, the middle is just kind of whatever it is. So what are your thoughts on that? These are whiskeys that I have at my house. Should you have these whiskeys at your house? I do think so. At least some of them to fill in those gaps. A whiskey for every occasion and an occasion for every whiskey out there, guys. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe to see more of my content. Again, I do both whiskey and book reviews. And one more time, apologize for the lighting and the sound. It is what it is. We do what we have to do for our family because that's the kind of guys that we are. But for now, my friends, I hope you're reading something good and drinking something great. Turn those pages and stay thirsty. Cheers.